And so it's time for this week's visit to the Work of the Week. Again in the company of the Crawford Art Gallery's Assistant Curator, Dr. Michael Waldron. Michael, we meet yet again virtually. Maybe someday we'll meet in person in the gallery. This week's Work of the Week is called Shannon Scheme No. 2, The Culvert, and it's from 1929 by George Atkinson, and it's an etching. Now, one word you didn't want me to mention when we've been talking over the last few weeks is that you actually have a doctorate. So you are Dr. Michael Waldron. And now, Doctor, I'd like to know whether you're a Doctor of Engineering or of Art, because it's a very, very, very strong piece of engineering drawing as far as I'm concerned.
Well, firstly, damn it, Connor, I'm an art historian, not an engineer.
Yes, Dr. McCoy.
It's a very interesting work of the week in that I can come at it from my art historian side of things, and yet it would be very interesting to the engineer, to the person who's interested in national or social history. Mm-hmm. Also, it is an etching, so there is a particular art process involved in making it as well. So very much something about industry at its core.
If you look at it as a work of art, first of all, there's just one big, long, and it's the name of it, the culvert, which is just obviously a very large pipe, isn't it? It's enormous. It takes up about 60-70% of the etching, like right up the middle of it.
It's a really dynamic sort of diagonal cylinder that runs from the bottom right corner kind of right into the background of the image on the left-hand side. And there are a number of figures, people working, to give you some sense of scale. So it is enormous. It reminds me a little bit of Dr. No, the James Bond movie, and those big cylindrical kind of pipes that James Bond is running through in the villain's lair.
Yeah.
So there's something very futuristic here, very different from the usual Irish landscape.
It's probably the most modern thing that was ever built in the country at the time. It certainly was the biggest thing. There were 5,000 workers involved in 10 miles of digging.
I think I read somewhere that the entire budget for the project made up something like 20% of the national budget of 1925. But that is a colossal sum.
This would become the powerhouse for Ireland. This piece of work was commissioned by the Irish government. So it was part of some sort of a PR or possibly even propaganda campaign by the government?
It was, because I think the Shannon scheme, of course, excited some interest, in Ireland, but also further afield. Hoover Dam was kind of looking over its shoulder because it hadn't been built yet.
Yes.
I was looking to see what Ireland was doing. So this was a commission from the state. And I suppose we have to realise that during the scheme itself, the ESB came into being.
Yeah.
The ESB commissioned another artist, Sean Keating, who was also on site. They commissioned him to create imagery around this scheme for promotional purposes. Equally, Atkinson was commissioned by the state to complete this record.
Yeah.
It remains to be seen whether we can consider it as effective PR or is the artist getting away with a little bit of social commentary as well. This particular print is one of a series of 3. First one is called Keeper Mountain. This one is called The Culvert, and the third one is called The Excavations. Earth-shattering moving of mountains, toil, and the extraordinary cutting through of the landscape, not without its problems.
Yeah.
The culverts, to my understanding, I could be corrected by an engineer, but I believe the culverts were to allow the land that was being cut through, to allow it to drain effectively, because of course it was disrupting all of the natural setup of the landscape. This was an engineering solution to a problem the scheme was creating.
The artist George Atkinson himself, these pieces that you just spoke about, they've been exhibited in the National Gallery and they're part of an exhibition that was taking place in the Crawford as well.
They are indeed. The 3 actually came to us in 2 different ways. The first print came to us as a gift from Lennox Robinson, the playwright, and the other 2 subsequently were given as gift to us. And so we were excited. Back in, I think it was 2018, the National Gallery of Ireland borrowed the set of 3 for their exhibition Making Their Mark, which explored the Irish etching revival that occurred in the early 20th century and looked at artists who were both painters and etchers.
Yeah.
George Atkinson very much belonged as part of that. Then, just before we had to close, this particular print was part of our exhibition Meisha Era, which explored the development of Ireland during the 20th century. And this sat alongside a painting by Jackie Yates, which is kind of a vision of utopia. So you have kind of something that is utopian, and next to it, this print, which could go either way. You could see construction or destruction in this image.
And there you have it, and that's the debate itself. Look, I think we leave the last word this week to the filmmakers and the documentary makers, and we have a clip from a documentary that was made probably around that time. So until next week, we're going back into the past, but in those days it was a vision of the future. Michael Waldron, Assistant Curator with the Culvert Art Gallery. Again, thanks for your time. Thanks for helping me through this little historical and engineering journey this week.
A pleasure, Connor. Thanks a million.
Through these openings, there will surge a wedge of water, a build-up of water fed from 4,000 square miles of river and lake. And all of it will go through the intakes and down the tubular penstocks to these turbines below. And it's here that the scheme is seen in all its massive greatness. Truly, there was never anything like this in Ireland before.
And so credit where credit is due this week. I'd like to say thank you to all the doctors that helped us in this week's Work of the Week. First of all to Dr. Michael Waldron.
Damn it, Connor, I'm an art historian, not an engineer.
And to Star Trek's Dr. McCoy.
I'm a doctor, not an engineer.
No, you're an engineer.
I'm a doctor, not a coal miner.
Look, I'm a doctor, not an escalator.
I don't know, Jim. This is a big ship. I'm just a country doctor.
I'm not a magician, Spock. Just an old country doctor. Keep saying that. Are you a doctor, aren't you?
I don't know.
And finally, also mentioned in this week's interview was Dr. No. Thank you. But remember, if you want to see this week's Work of the Week, just quite simply go to Culvert Art Gallery /Work of the Week. And on that webpage, you'll find many more resources that can be used by all the family until the Culvert Art Gallery opens its doors again for all of us to enjoy.